I had never been inside an alien palace before. Truth be told, I didn't know I'd be invited at all. Humans were not generally welcomed in the dominion of Xyleria, an empire spanning hundreds of star systems. And yet, here I was, standing in a vast hall made of gleaming obsidian and crystalline pillars that refracted light into spectral rainbows. Guards in iridescent armor lined the walls. Their expressions were unreadable, but their weapons were ready. I had no weapon. I had no backup. Just my human instincts and whatever charm I could muster. At the far end of the hall stood the royal family, or, at least, the part that mattered. The alien queen, regal and imposing, her dark eyes scanning everyone with a calm, yet piercing gaze. She was beautiful in a way that was both alien and terrifying. And beside her, slightly behind, I caught a glimpse of her daughter, the princess. And that's when it happened. The princess ran. Not in a measured, formal way as her mother might have walked. She ran like a human child discovering freedom for the first time. She launched herself across the obsidian floor and, before anyone could react, she wrapped herself around me in a hug. The hall froze. Silence fell so completely that I could hear the faint hum of the palace energy conduits. The queen's eyes widened, and the guards froze mid-step, unsure of how to react. Everyone, alien and human alike, watched. I stood there, stunned. The princess held on to me as if she had known me her entire life. "You," she whispered, almost to herself. I was so scared. I didn't know what to say. And apparently, neither did the entire palace. Middle. Discovering the truth. The princess, Alara, as I later learned, was no ordinary child. She was the heir to an empire that could obliterate planets without warning. And yet, here she was, showing vulnerability in front of a stranger. After the initial shock, the queen cleared her throat. Her voice, low and commanding, filled the hall. "Release him," she said. The guards hesitated. "Now." I stumbled backward as the princess reluctantly let go. She held my hand, though, as if seeking assurance that I wasn't going anywhere. "You are," the queen said, studying me like one might study a rare artifact. "Not like the others." "Others?" I asked. "The humans we've captured before. Predictable. Obedient. Easily broken," the queen replied. I swallowed hard. "I'm not predictable. And I don't obey just because someone tells me to." A flicker of something, approval, amusement, crossed her face. She leaned slightly forward. "You are bold. Dangerous in your audacity." "Dangerous?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," she said simply. "And perhaps useful." The princess tugged gently at my hand. "You'll protect me, won't you?" she whispered. Her trust was complete and terrifying. I nodded, though I didn't fully understand the implications. The palace and its secrets. The palace itself was a maze of technology and architecture beyond human comprehension. Floors moved silently beneath your feet. Walls shimmered, not with mirrors, but with data streams embedded into the material. I could see the flow of information, alien code flowing like rivers through the palace walls. Alara guided me through hidden corridors that her guards didn't even know existed. She was small, but quick, nimble, and surprisingly strong. I was amazed at how she seemed to navigate the palace with ease, like it was second nature. "I can't go to the throne room yet," she whispered. They're watching me." "Watching you? Don't you live here?" She shook her head. "I live in fear of her approval. And sometimes the other court members. They want me out of the way." I realized then that the hug wasn't just a spontaneous gesture. It was a plea for protection. And I had no idea if I was ready for that responsibility. The test of trust. Over the next few days, I moved through the palace with Alara. She taught me the protocols, how to navigate the guards, how to respond to the queen's subtle signals, how to move without drawing attention. But the true test came during the evening feast. The queen, flanked by her council, eyed me across the hall. I could feel her assessment in every glance. And then she spoke. "You have been accepted into the palace for observation," she said. "You will remain with the princess until I see fit." I swallowed. "Accepted." "Yes," the queen said, "though it is a precarious privilege. One wrong move, and you will regret it." The princess smiled at me from across the table. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "You didn't flinch," she whispered later as we walked through the palace gardens. "When you hugged me, I expected you to pull away or recoil. Most humans would have." "I've never been good at following expectations," I replied. She giggled softly, and I realized that despite being an alien princess, she had a very human sense of humor. Middle conflict, court intrigue. The palace was a dangerous place. Not because of monsters or weapons, though both existed, but because of politics. Every member of the court had agendas, alliances, and secrets. Some wanted the queen to replace her daughter. Others saw the princess as a threat to their own power. I became a pawn in ways I didn't fully understand. Alara trusted me, but I had to earn the trust of the guards, the council, and most importantly, the queen. Rumors of my favor with the princess spread quickly. Some envied me, others plotted against me. One evening, a council member confronted me in the halls. "You are a human," he hissed. "You have no place here. Do you not understand what you risk?" "I understand perfectly," I said. "And I also understand that the princess trusts me. And as long as I do right by her, your threats mean nothing." He sneered. Bold words. "Let us see if they hold when the palace itself turns against you." I realized then that survival was not just about strength or strategy, it was about understanding loyalty and alliances. Climactic turn. The threat arrives. News came that the neighboring empire had launched an attack on the palace outskirts. Their fleet, massive and relentless, threatened the very survival of the Xylarian royal family. The queen convened an emergency council. Alara ran to me. "You have to stay with me," she said. "I don't know what to do." I took her hand. "You won't be alone. I promise." The queen, observing us from the council dais, said nothing. But I could feel her eyes on me, weighing every action. We rushed to the observation deck. The sky above shimmered with energy signatures of the approaching fleet. Missiles arced through space, targeting the palace's defense platforms. I realized the only way to save the princess and the palace was to take control of one of the defense stations. But it was guarded by elite soldiers loyal to the queen. Alara squeezed my hand. "I trust you," she said. And somehow, that made me bolder than I'd ever been. The battle. I moved through the corridors, evading patrols and deactivating security locks. The princess stayed behind, hidden in a secure chamber, waiting for my return. I reached the command terminal and began redirecting the palace's defense systems. Energy cannons aligned, shields reinforced, targeting arrays recalibrated. I wasn't trained in Xylarian technology, but instinct, logic, and a little luck carried me through. The fleet arrived. Missiles fired. Energy beams sliced through the void. The palace shook violently. Then I saw it, the flagship of the attackers, massive and bristling with weaponry. I locked the targeting system. The missiles fired. One direct hit, another, and the flagship started to break apart. The attack faltered. The remaining ships, seeing the flagship disabled, retreated. The palace had survived. The princess was safe. Lengthy ending, recognition, trust, and a new era. When the dust settled, I returned to the princess's chamber. She ran to me again, not just in gratitude, but in relief. She hugged me tightly, as if confirming that I had not betrayed her trust. The queen appeared behind her, silent at first. Then she spoke, her voice echoing with authority. "You have saved the princess. You have saved the palace. You have done what many soldiers, many humans, and many Xylarians could not." I bowed lightly, unsure if this was praise or a warning. "Do you understand," she continued, "that the consequences of failure would have been catastrophic?" "Yes, Your Majesty." She studied me for a long moment. "And yet you succeeded. Not through brute force, not through cunning alone, but because you understood trust, loyalty, courage." Alara tugged my hand. "I knew you would do it." The queen's eyes softened, ever so slightly. "Perhaps humans are not as predictable as we believed. Perhaps there is value in allowing one to choose courage freely, even against an empire that teaches fear." The hall remained silent. The guards, council members, and even servants paused, witnessing the rare moment of acknowledgement. I realized that nothing would ever be the same. I was not just a human who had survived the palace. I was someone who had earned a place in its history. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed, not with fear, but with cautious curiosity. Alara's trust in me grew, and the queen, though still imposing and commanding, allowed a small space for human influence within her court. And every time the princess ran to hug me, whether in relief, joy, or sheer excitement, the palace went silent. Not in fear, not in awe, but in recognition of something greater, the bond that had bridged species, power, and worlds. For the first time in its long history, the Xylarian palace had witnessed a moment where trust, courage, and humanity reshaped the course of its empire. And in that silence, everything changed. The battle had ended, but the palace was far from calm. The corridors still hummed with residual energy from the defense systems, and the walls bore faint scars from the energy beams that had ripped across them. The council members gathered cautiously, whispering among themselves, unsure how to react to the human who had just saved the entire dominion. I returned to the princess's chamber, my body aching from the adrenaline, my mind still racing with the events of the past hours. Alara didn't wait for me to speak. She ran to me as she had before, but this time her hug was filled with a quiet, almost solemn relief. "You saved everyone," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I knew you would." I held her tighter than before, letting her feel that humans, though fragile, could be steadfast. "I promised I'd protect you, and I always keep my promises," I said. The door opened quietly behind us, and the queen stepped in. Her presence filled the chamber in a way that made every other thought vanish. She had been silent, watching me through the entire battle, her expression unreadable. But now, her gaze softened ever so slightly, and a long, measured silence passed before she spoke. "You have done what many soldiers of Xylaria could not. You have shown courage, resourcefulness, and a loyalty," she said. Her voice, though stern, carried a weight of respect that was palpable. "You have not only preserved the life of my daughter, but the integrity of the empire itself. And for that, you will be remembered." I bowed lightly, unsure how to respond to words of such magnitude. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I didn't act for praise. I did what I had to do," I said. The princess looked up at the queen, and in that silent exchange, I saw something I hadn't expected: approval, pride, and perhaps even hope. The queen approached us slowly and studied me with those piercing eyes that could pierce through steel and fire. "You are unlike any human I have ever met," she said. "You understand trust in ways our empire has long forgotten. Perhaps you have changed more than just the events of today." Alara smiled, but it was tinged with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. He stayed, even when it was dangerous, even when the palace could have turned against him. That means something. I felt a warmth in my chest at her words. It wasn't just trust, it was respect, acknowledgement, and perhaps something deeper. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly needed, not as a soldier, not as a stranger, but as someone who had earned a place in a world far beyond my own. The following days were unlike any other in the palace's long history. Where once the halls were filled with rigid protocol, tension, and the careful calculations of courtiers, there was now cautious curiosity. The council members, still wary of my human presence, began to approach me, not with hostility, but with questions. Some offered advice. Some simply watched, waiting to understand the impact of my actions. The princess, however, needed no understanding. She trusted me fully, without hesitation, and each time she ran to hug me, whether in joy, relief, or sheer excitement, the palace fell silent. Not in fear this time, not in awe, but in recognition. The queen began to allow small gestures of change. Guards who had once been skeptical of my presence now nodded in acknowledgement. Strategists began to consider my opinions, curious about the human who had outmaneuvered the invaders and saved the empire. And in moments when I could steal them, the princess and I would walk the gardens together, exchanging thoughts, dreams, and plans. It wasn't just the palace that had shifted. Something in me had changed as well. I realized that courage wasn't simply about standing alone or fighting battles. It was about understanding others, earning trust, and choosing to act when the stakes were highest. And in that, I had found my place. One evening, as the twin suns of Xyleria dipped below the horizon, painting the palace in hues of crimson and gold, the queen summoned me. I approached her cautiously, unsure what to expect. "You have done more than preserve life today," she said. "You have reminded us of something long forgotten, that even across worlds and species, honor, courage, and loyalty can shape destiny. You are a human, yes, but one whose choices echo louder than most empires." I bowed. I only did what I had to do. "Perhaps," she said, "but that is precisely what makes you extraordinary." Alara appeared behind her mother, her eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. She ran to me once more, wrapping her arms around me tightly. This time, the hug wasn't just relief. It was gratitude, joy, and a recognition that our lives were now irrevocably intertwined. For the first time in centuries, the palace had witnessed a moment where trust bridged species, courage redefined protocol, and the bond between human and alien reshaped history. And in that silence, every whisper, every glance, every expectation that had once ruled the halls of Xyleria faded away. In its place was something entirely new, a promise that even in a galaxy filled with power, fear, and intrigue, the heart could still be the strongest force of all. I had not only survived the palace, I had changed it, and as long as I remained by her side, nothing, not even an empire, would ever be the same again.